The most fascinating facts about dolphins tonight. We're exploring the world of dolphins. One of the ocean's most intelligent and socially complex mammal families, dolphins, never fully lose consciousness when they rest, because breathing is a conscious action for them and not an automatic reflex. A dolphin that fell completely asleep would stop breathing and drown. To get around this, dolphins shut down only one half of their brain at a time, while the other half stays alert. The eye connected to the resting hemisphere closes, while the opposite eye stays open, watching for predators, boat traffic, or the surface itself. After a few hours, the pattern switches sides, and the other half of the brain takes its turn resting. This is called Unihemispheric Sleep, and it means a dolphin is, in a very real sense, always half awake. A sleeping dolphin often drifts slowly near the surface or swims in a slow, steady rhythm alongside its pod, rising to breathe every so often without ever needing to fully wake up to do it. Every bottlenose dolphin develops its own signature whistle within the first few months of life, and that whistle functions almost exactly like a name. Calves begin experimenting with different sounds and over time settle into one distinct whistle pattern that stays with them for the rest of their life. Other dolphins learn to recognize this signature and will call it out to get that specific individual's attention, much the way a person might call across a room. Researchers have found that dolphins will even mimic a friend's or family member's signature whistle to address them directly, effectively saying a name out loud. Mothers and calves, separated in open water, can find each other again by exchanging these calls, and pod members seem to keep a mental catalog of the many signature whistles that belong to the dolphins they know, sometimes retaining them across decades of separation. A dolphin builds its picture of the world through sound, not sight, by producing rapid clicks from the nasal passages below the blowhole and focusing them through a fatty, rounded organ in the forehead called the melon. A dolphin sends a narrow beam of sound out into the water ahead of it. When those clicks strike an object, whether a fish, a rock, or a swimmer, the returning echoes travel back through the dolphin's lower jaw, which is filled with fat that conducts sound efficiently to the inner ear. From these echoes, a dolphin can judge an object's distance, size, shape, density, and even something about its internal structure, all within a fraction of a second. This ability, called echolocation, lets dolphins hunt effectively in murky or dark water where eyesight would be nearly useless, and it is precise enough that a dolphin can distinguish between two very similarly shaped objects just by the differences in the returning echo. Dolphins are widely recognized as one of the most cognitively complex animals in the ocean, and part of that reputation comes from their memory. Bottlenose dolphins have been shown to recognize the signature whistles of other dolphins they have not heard in over 20 years, which researchers consider one of the longest social memories recorded in any species outside of humans. This long memory supports relationships that can last a lifetime. Dolphins that were once part of the same pod even if separated for years by migration or changing group membership, appear to remember each other when their paths cross again. That kind of memory suggests a social world built on more than instinct alone, one where individual relationships, histories, and even reputations may matter over the course of many years. Dolphin pods are fluid rather than fixed. Unlike some animal groups that stay together as a permanent unit, many dolphin societies operate on what researchers call a fission fusion system, where the overall group constantly splits into smaller clusters and merges back together, depending on the situation. A pod might separate into a handful of individuals to hunt in one area, then reunite later with dozens of others to rest, socialize, or travel. Membership can shift by the hour, with dolphins moving between different subgroups based on age, sex, relationships, or what the group happens to be doing. Some associations are casual and brief, while others, particularly between close relatives or long-term allies, are stable and repeated across years. This flexible social structure lets dolphins balance the benefits of group living, like shared protection and cooperative hunting, with the freedom to adjust who they are near depending on the day. A newborn dolphin calf enters the world tail first, the reverse of how most mammals are born, which reduces the risk of the calf drowning during delivery, since its blowhole reaches open air last. Within the first hour of life, the calf must already know how to swim well enough to reach the surface and take its first breath, and it typically stays pressed close to its mother's side, riding in the slipstream created by her movement through the water. This position, sometimes called the echelon position, lets the calf conserve energy by being pulled along rather than swimming entirely on its own. Calves nurse on extremely fat, rich milk for a year or more, and mothers spend that time teaching hunting techniques, safe travel routes, and social behavior through direct example. In many species, calves stay close to their mothers for 3 to 6 years, a long period of dependency that gives them time to absorb the skills and social knowledge they will rely on for the rest of their lives. Some populations of bottlenose dolphins have been observed breaking off pieces of marine sponge and wearing them over their snouts like a protective glove while foraging along the rocky, sometimes sharp seafloor. This behavior, seen most famously in Shark Bay, Australia, appears to protect the dolphin's sensitive rostrum from being scraped or stung while it pokes through the substrate searching for fish hiding in the sand. What makes this especially notable is that the skill is not universal. It tends to pass from mother to calf, primarily along matrilineal lines, suggesting a form of learned, socially transmitted tool use rather than an instinct every dolphin is simply born with. Researchers view sponge foraging as one of the clearest examples of culture in a marine mammal, a specific technique that spreads through direct teaching and imitation within particular family lines rather than appearing everywhere the behavior would be physically possible. When researchers marked bottlenose dolphins with temporary paint or placed stickers on parts of their bodies they could not normally see, then presented them with a mirror. The dolphins spent noticeably more time twisting and positioning themselves to examine the marked areas. This kind of behavior is used by scientists as a test for self-recognition, the ability to understand that the reflection in the mirror is one's own body rather than another animal. Dolphins pass this test at a young age, and they do so using vision alone, which is notable given how much of their daily experience relies on sound rather than sight. Self-recognition of this kind has only been documented in a small number of species, including great apes, elephants, and magpies, placing dolphins among a very short list of animals that appear to understand the difference between themselves and an image of themselves. A dolphin's skin heals at a pace that would be extraordinary in almost any other mammal. Deep gashes from boat propellers, shark bites, or fights with rival dolphins can close and largely heal within weeks, often without infection, even though the wound is constantly submerged in bacteria-laden seawater. Scientists studying this rapid healing have found that dolphin blood carries unusually effective clotting properties, and their tissue seems able to regenerate in a way that reduces both blood loss and scarring compared to what the same injury would cause in a human or land mammal. Layers of blubber beneath the skin also help cushion and protect the body, while the outer skin itself is smooth, sensitive, and constantly shedding and regrowing, replacing its outer layer roughly every couple of hours. This constant turnover may also help keep the skin free of algae and parasites that would otherwise slow a fast-swimming animal down. Dolphins are capable of remarkable bursts of speed in short chases, with some species reaching speeds well over 20 miles an hour when pursuing prey or escaping a threat. Their streamlined bodies, powerful tail flukes, and the way they move in smooth, repeated arcs at the surface, called porpoising, all reduce drag and let them cover long distances efficiently. Porpoising itself is not purely playful. Leaping clear of the water to breathe while swimming fast actually costs less energy than pushing through the surface resistance of water at speed. So a traveling dolphin often breaches simply because it is the most efficient way to breathe without slowing down. At the same time, dolphins do leap, spin, and slap the water purely for reasons that look a great deal like enjoyment, particularly young dolphins, who spend a significant portion of each day in activity that seems to serve no purpose beyond play itself. The ocean is full of species that carry the name dolphin, and one of the largest and most recognizable, the orca, is often thought of as an entirely separate animal when it is, in fact, the largest member of the oceanic dolphin family. Orcas share the same basic body plan, echolocation ability, and complex social structure found throughout the dolphin family, just scaled up considerably, with adult males reaching lengths of over 30 feet. Their black and white coloring, distinct dorsal fin, and reputation as apex predators set them apart in the public imagination. But biologically, they sit firmly within the same taxonomic family as bottlenose and common dolphins. Orca pods are built around extremely close matrilineal bonds, with some populations of males staying with their mothers for their entire lives, a degree of lifelong attachment that is unusual even among highly social mammals. Hunting in a group gives dolphins access to techniques that would be impossible for a lone animal, and different populations have developed remarkably specific cooperative strategies suited to their environment. In some coastal areas, dolphins work together to drive schools of fish into tight, swirling balls near the surface, then take turns slicing through the group to feed while the others maintain the circle. In certain shallow, muddy estuaries, dolphins have been observed forming a ring around a school of fish and beating their tails against the sea floor to stir up a curtain of mud, which panics the fish into leaping directly into the open mouths of dolphins waiting at the edge of the ring. Other populations herd fish onto muddy banks and briefly strand themselves on the shore to snatch a meal before wriggling back into the water. These specialized techniques are typically passed down within specific communities rather than appearing everywhere the species lives, meaning a dolphin's hunting style often depends heavily on which particular group it was raised in. Relative to body size, a dolphin's brain is large and its outer layer, the cortex, is folded into an intricate pattern of ridges and grooves that in some measurements exceeds the folding complexity found in the human brain. This extensive folding increases the surface area available for processing information without requiring a larger skull, and it is generally associated with more complex cognitive processing across many species. Dolphin brains also contain spindle neurons, a specialized cell type once thought to exist only in humans and great apes, which are linked to social awareness, emotional processing, and rapid intuitive decision-making. The exact relationship between brain structure and dolphin intelligence is still an active area of study, but the physical evidence consistently points toward a nervous system built for handling rich sensory information, complex social relationships, and quick adaptive behavior all at once. Breathing for a dolphin is entirely voluntary, controlled through a single blowhole located on top of the head that opens only when the dolphin chooses to surface and exhale. A muscular flap seals the blowhole shut the rest of the time, keeping water out during dives that can last several minutes, depending on the species and the depth involved. Because every breath requires a conscious decision, dolphins never fall into the kind of deep, all-encompassing sleep that land mammals experience, which is part of why their unihemispheric resting pattern evolved in the first place. When a dolphin does surface to breathe, the exhale happens explosively, clearing built-up carbon dioxide and old air in well under a second, followed by an equally quick inhale before the blowhole seals again and the dolphin continues on its way, often without breaking its swimming rhythm at all. Diving deep into the ocean exposes a dolphin's body to intense pressure, and several physical adaptations make this possible without injury. A dolphin's rib cage is flexible enough to partially collapse under pressure, protecting the lungs from damage while reducing the amount of air compressed inside the chest. Oxygen is stored efficiently in the blood and muscle tissue rather than primarily in the lungs, thanks to high concentrations of oxygen-binding proteins, allowing a dolphin to function for extended periods without needing to breathe air that is already inside its body. Blood flow can also be redirected during a deep dive, prioritizing the brain and heart over less critical tissue, a response similar to what is seen in seals and whales. Some deep-diving dolphin species can descend hundreds of feet and remain submerged for close to 10 minutes, relying on this combination of adaptations to hunt in the dark. Cold water far below the surface. Dolphins produce an enormous range of sounds beyond the clicks used for echolocation, including whistles, squeaks, barks, and pulsed calls that appear to serve social rather than navigational purposes. Many of these sounds occur at frequencies well above the upper limit of human hearing, meaning a pod of dolphins can be having what amounts to an active conversation in a register, completely silent to a person standing nearby. Researchers studying these calls have found patterns that vary by context, with certain sound types appearing more often during hunting, others during reunions after time apart, and others during moments of apparent distress or excitement. While there is no confirmed evidence of a structured dolphin language in the way humans use language, the sheer variety and situational specificity of their calls suggests a communication system built for coordinating group behavior, maintaining relationships, and passing along real-time information about the environment. Some dolphin communities gather in extraordinarily large numbers, forming what are known as superpods that can include several hundred to over 1,000 individuals moving together across open water. These massive gatherings are usually temporary, formed when the smaller, everyday groups that make up a fission-fusion society happen to converge, often near a particularly rich source of food or during long-distance travel. Within a superpod, the usual smaller clusters of close relatives and regular companions tend to remain visible, essentially traveling as tight units embedded inside the larger mass, rather than dissolving into a single undifferentiated crowd. Superpods can create a striking scene at the surface, with dolphins breaching, spinning, and porpoising across a wide stretch of ocean. And some researchers believe these large gatherings may also serve a social function beyond feeding, offering opportunities for individuals from different smaller groups to interact, and in some cases for young dolphins to encounter potential future mates. Male bottlenose dolphins in some populations form multi-level alliances that researchers consider among the most complex social structures documented outside of humans. At the first level, 2 or 3 males form a tight partnership, cooperating to find and guard a receptive female. Several of these first-level alliances can then combine into a larger second-level alliance, working together against rival groups of males. In certain well-studied populations, these second-level alliances have even been observed forming larger, looser third-level networks, essentially alliances of alliances that shift and reform depending on circumstances. Maintaining these layered relationships requires males to keep track of who is currently allied with whom, who owes cooperation to whom, and how those relationships might shift over time. A level of social bookkeeping that researchers compare to the complexity of primate political alliances. While overall pod leadership in dolphins tends to be fluid rather than fixed to a single individual, certain species show a strong matriarchal pattern in which older, experience females play an outsized role in guiding group movement and decision-making. In orca pods, for example, post-reproductive females, individuals well beyond the age of having their own calves, often lead their family group to reliable feeding grounds, drawing on decades of accumulated knowledge about where prey is likely to be found during lean periods. This pattern suggests that in at least some dolphin societies, the value of an individual to the group does not end with reproduction, but continues through the transmission of experience and memory, a dynamic that researchers studying long-lived, socially complex animals have compared to the role grandmothers play in some human societies. Many dolphin populations follow predictable seasonal movements, traveling long distances between feeding grounds and calving areas as water temperature, prey availability, and breeding needs shift throughout the year. Some coastal populations stay within a relatively limited home range their entire lives, becoming intimately familiar with the coastline, sandbars, and channels of a single stretch of coast passed down through generations. Other species, particularly those living in the open ocean, migrate across enormous distances, following the movement of the fish and squid schools that make up their diet. These migrations are rarely a straight line from one point to another. Pods often take winding, opportunistic routes, adjusting based on where food happens to be concentrated in a given week, which means the same population might follow a noticeably different path from one year to the next, depending on shifting ocean conditions. A dolphin's tail fluke carries a pattern of nicks, scars, and shape variations along its trailing edge that is as individual as a fingerprint, and researchers rely on this fact heavily in long-term field studies. By photographing the fluke each time a dolphin surfaces to dive, scientists build catalogs that let them recognize the same individual dolphin years or even decades later, without needing to tag or capture the animal at all. This method, called photo identification, has allowed some research projects to track specific dolphins across their entire lives, documenting when they had calves, which other dolphins they associated with most often, and how their social relationships changed over time. The scars themselves often tell their own story, recording encounters with boat propellers, shark bites, fishing gear, or fights with other dolphins, turning each fluke into a kind of visual record of an individual's history in the water. Dolphins are known to blow rings of air, underwater purely, as far as researchers can tell, for the enjoyment of it. By releasing a burst of air from the blowhole and then manipulating the resulting bubble with quick flicks of the head or tail, a dolphin can shape it into a stable spinning ring or a wide, flat bubble disc that can hold together in the water for several seconds before drifting apart. Once a ring is formed, dolphins will often swim around it, poke at it with their rostrum, or bite through it to split it into two smaller rings, sometimes repeating the whole process again and again. This behavior appears most often in dolphins living in professional care, where researchers have had the opportunity to observe it closely, and it is generally interpreted as a form of play, an activity with no direct connection to feeding, safety, or reproduction, done simply because the dolphin finds it engaging. The teeth lining a dolphin's jaw are built for gripping rather than chewing, all roughly conical and uniform in shape rather than divided into different types for cutting, tearing and grinding the way many land mammal teeth are. A dolphin uses its teeth to seize a fish or squid firmly, then swallows the prey whole or in large pieces, without breaking it down inside the mouth first. This means digestion relies heavily on a multi-chambered stomach, where the first chamber acts somewhat like the grinding stomach found in birds, mechanically breaking food down before it moves on to be chemically digested. The number of teeth varies by species, with some dolphins carrying well over 100 small conical teeth useful for a diet of slippery, fast-moving fish that need to be caught and held securely rather than processed slowly. Dolphin eyes are positioned on either side of the head, giving them a wide field of view and reasonably good vision both underwater and above the surface, a dual capability that is fairly unusual among marine animals. A specialized structure behind the retina reflects light back through the eye a second time, boosting sensitivity in dim or murky water, similar to the reflective layer that makes a cat's eyes glow in torchlight. Above water, dolphins can see well enough to track a thrown object, judge distance for a jump, or watch a boat or person on a nearby shore, and their eyes adjust quickly when moving between the different light conditions found above and below the surface. Even with capable eyesight, however, dolphins in the wild rely on echolocation as their primary tool for locating prey and navigating, particularly in water, where visibility is limited by depth, sediment, or darkness, reserving vision as a secondary sense that becomes especially useful near the surface and in clear, shallow water. Underwater hearing in dolphins is extraordinarily refined, extending to frequencies far beyond the upper range of human ears and allowing them to detect the fine details carried in returning echolocation clicks. Sound reaches the inner ear primarily through the lower jaw, which is filled with fat that conducts vibrations efficiently toward the ear structures, rather than through external ear openings the way sound reaches a human ear. This jaw-based hearing pathway lets a dolphin pinpoint the direction a sound is coming from with impressive accuracy, an important skill both for hunting through echolocation and for tracking the calls of other dolphins across open water, because sound travels faster and farther underwater than in air. A dolphin's world is shaped heavily by an auditory landscape that can stretch for miles in favorable conditions, meaning calls, clicks, and the general noise of the ocean form a constant backdrop that dolphins are almost certainly far more attuned to than any land-based animal could ever be. Cooperative care of calves extends in many dolphin populations beyond a mother and her own offspring, a behavior researchers call allopranting. Other females in the pod, sometimes young dolphins that have not yet had calves of their own, will spend time swimming alongside a calf, staying nearby while its mother forages or rests, and in some cases even nursing a calf that is not their own. This kind of shared caretaking may give young females valuable practice before they raise their own calves, while also giving mothers occasional breaks that let them feed more efficiently without having to constantly monitor a young, energetic calf at the same time. Allopranting behavior varies between populations and species, but where it occurs, it points toward a social structure where raising young is, at least in part, a group responsibility rather than something handled entirely by a single mother in isolation. A Dolphins' body temperature stays remarkably stable regardless of the surrounding water, thanks largely to a thick layer of blubber just beneath the skin that acts as effective insulation against heat loss. This blubber layer varies in thickness depending on the species and the climate it lives in, with dolphins in colder waters generally carrying more insulating fat than those living in warm tropical seas. Blood vessels near the surface of the skin, particularly in the fins and flukes, can constrict to conserve heat in cold conditions or dilate to release excess heat. When the dolphin is working hard or swimming through warmer water, functioning almost like a built-in thermostat. This ability to regulate temperature so precisely is part of what allows dolphins to live successfully across such a wide range of ocean environments. From the frigid waters near polar regions to warm coastal shallows near the equator, each population fine-tuned by generations of adaptation to its particular corner of the ocean. Occasionally, and for reasons that are not always fully understood, groups of dolphins strand themselves on beaches, sometimes in large numbers all at once. Researchers have proposed several explanations depending on the circumstances, including illness or injury in one member of a tightly bonded pod that others refuse to abandon even as they follow it into shallow, dangerous water, disruptions to echolocation caused by unusual seafloor terrain or human-generated underwater noise, and navigational errors during unfamiliar migrations. What makes mass strandings particularly striking is the apparent social cohesion behind them. In many documented cases, healthy dolphins have stranded themselves alongside a sick or injured companion rather than swimming back to open water alone, a pattern that rescue teams have had to work around carefully, since returning only the healthy individuals to the sea sometimes results in them stranding again in an apparent attempt to stay with the rest of the group. Play in young dolphins takes many forms, and one of the more visually striking examples involves surfing the pressure wave created by a moving boat or the crest of an ocean swell. Calves and juveniles will position themselves just ahead of a boat's bow or within the curl of a breaking wave, riding the pushed water with barely any effort of their own, sometimes for extended stretches at a time. This bow-riding behavior appears to require very little energy once a dolphin has positioned itself correctly, letting the wave do the work of propulsion, and dolphins seem to actively seek it out rather than simply tolerating boats that happen to be nearby. Beyond wave riding, young dolphins chase seaweed, toss small objects like shells or sponges back and forth, and engage in mock fights and chases with podmates, all activities that closely resemble play behavior seen in young mammals across many other species, and which likely help develop the coordination, strength, and social skills a calf will need as an adult. Learning to hunt is a gradual process for a young dolphin, built largely through watching and imitating adults rather than through pure instinct alone. Calves spend years observing their mothers and other pod members chase, herd, and capture prey, gradually attempting smaller versions of the same techniques themselves, often clumsily at first. In populations with specialized hunting methods, such as mud ring feeding or tool-assisted foraging with sponges, calves that stay close to a mother who practices that particular technique are far more likely to pick it up themselves, while calves raised by mothers who use different strategies typically grow up using those instead. This pattern of learned, Socially transmitted hunting behavior means a dolphin's foraging style is shaped as much by its early upbringing as by anything encoded genetically. Another strong piece of evidence that dolphin societies pass down knowledge across generations in a way that closely resembles culture. Dolphin calves are born already capable of an impressive feat of physical coordination, needing to swim to the surface for their first breath within moments of birth, but their echolocation ability develops more gradually over the following months. While the physical structures needed for echolocation, the melon, the nasal passages, and the fat-filled lower jaw are present from birth, young calves appear to take time refining their ability to interpret the returning echoes with the same precision adults display. During this early period, calves rely heavily on staying close to their mothers, both for protection and because proximity allows them to benefit from her more experienced echolocation and hunting skills while their own abilities are still developing. By the time a calf is weaned, typically somewhere between 1 and several years of age depending on the species, its sensory and hunting skills have usually matured enough to support independent foraging, though social learning by watching other pod members often continues well beyond that point. Dolphins appear in the mythology and folklore of cultures across nearly every coastline in the world, almost always cast in a favorable light. Ancient Greek sailors considered it good luck to be accompanied by dolphins at sea, and dolphins appear frequently in Greek art and story as protectors of shipwrecked sailors, sometimes carrying stranded people safely to shore. Depictions of dolphins have been found on coins, mosaics, and pottery throughout the ancient Mediterranean world, often associated with safe passage, prosperity, and the sea gods themselves. Similar reverence appears in coastal cultures far beyond Greece, from Pacific island traditions that treat dolphins as guides and companions of the sea, to South American river communities that built elaborate mythology around the pink river dolphins living in the Amazon. Across all these traditions, a recurring theme emerges. Dolphins consistently framed not as distant wildlife but as intelligent, friendly presences with some kind of meaningful connection to human life. Reports of wild dolphins helping distressed swimmers, guiding lost boats back toward shore, or even driving away sharks that were threatening a person in the water appear across many different coastal regions and time periods, from historical accounts to modern news stories. While it is difficult to confirm the intent behind any single documented case, since dolphins are also simply curious and often approach unfamiliar objects and animals in the water regardless of circumstance, the consistency of these reports across cultures and centuries has fed into the strong reputation dolphins hold as friendly toward humans. Some researchers suggest that behaviors dolphins use naturally within their own pods, such as supporting an injured or struggling podmate at the surface so it can breathe, may sometimes extend toward distressed animals of other species, including humans, though this remains an area of ongoing scientific interest rather than settled fact. Regardless of the exact explanation, the pattern of dolphins approaching people in trouble at sea has persisted long enough and across enough unrelated communities to have become a deeply embedded part of how many cultures view them. The relationship between a dolphin mother and her calf is one of the most extended parental bonds found among marine mammals, often lasting several years and in some populations continuing in a looser form for the rest of the calf's life. Beyond nursing and physical protection, a mother dolphin actively teaches, allowing her calf to watch and gradually participate in hunting, guiding it along familiar travel routes and introducing it to other members of the pod. Female calves in particular sometimes stay associated with their mothers well into adulthood, occasionally even after having calves of their own, creating multi-generational family groups that travel and forage together. Male calves in many populations eventually separate more fully from their mothers as they mature, often forming close bonds instead with other males their own age, bonds that in some species develop into the lifelong alliances used later for finding mates. This extended period of maternal investment, sometimes stretching past half a decade for a single calf, reflects how much a young dolphin depends on both time and social exposure to develop into a fully capable adult. Individual personality differences show up clearly in dolphins under close observation, with some individuals consistently bolder, more curious, or more likely to initiate play, while others in the same pod tend to hang back, stay closer to familiar companions, or show more caution around new objects and unfamiliar animals. These personality patterns tend to remain fairly stable over a dolphin's lifetime, similar to temperament differences documented in many other intelligent, long-lived species. Caretakers working closely with dolphins in professional care settings often describe distinct individual quirks, particular preferred toys, favorite games, specific people or other dolphins they seem to prefer spending time with, and consistent reactions to new situations that mark one dolphin as noticeably different from another, even within the same species and similar upbringing. This individuality reinforces a broader pattern seen throughout dolphin research, that these are not simply interchangeable members of a uniform species, but animals with recognizable, lasting personal characteristics. A dolphin's flippers contain the same basic bone structure found in the forelimb of any mammal, a legacy of their evolutionary history as land-dwelling animals that gradually returned to the ocean tens of millions of years ago. Beneath the smooth, streamlined surface of a dolphin flipper lie bones, arranged in a pattern that closely mirrors the bones of a human hand and arm, complete with the equivalent of a shoulder, elbow, wrist, and multiple digit-like bones bundled together and encased in a rigid, paddle-shaped covering. This shared skeletal blueprint is one of the clearest pieces of evidence connecting dolphins to their distant land-based ancestors, a lineage that also includes hippopotamuses as among their closest living land relatives. Over millions of years, those ancestral limbs gradually transformed from walking legs into the efficient, rigid flippers used today for steering and stabilizing, while the true means of propulsion shifted entirely to powerful up and down strokes of the tail. Unlike fish, whose tails move side to side, a dolphin's tail fluke moves up and down, a difference that traces directly back to their history as land mammals. Fish evolved their side-to-side swimming motion from ancestors that were always aquatic, with a spine that flexes naturally in a horizontal plane. Dolphins descending from four-legged land mammals whose spines were built to flex vertically for running and galloping, retained that same vertical flexibility even after returning fully to life in the water, and their swimming stroke evolved around it instead of against it. This vertical tail motion, powered by strong muscles along the back and lower body, turns out to be highly efficient for sustained swimming, allowing dolphins to cover long distances and reach considerable speeds using a movement pattern that is, at its core, simply an aquatic adaptation of the same up and down spine motion a running four-legged mammal would use on land, dolphins living near. Coastlines often develop an intimate familiarity with local geography that goes well beyond simply recognizing a general area. Researchers studying resident coastal populations have documented individual dolphins using the same specific channels, sandbars, and feeding spots repeatedly over the course of years, apparently retaining detailed mental maps of underwater terrain that likely help them hunt efficiently and avoid hazards like shallow rocks or strong currents. Some populations even show clear generational patterns, with calves learning and later reusing the exact travel routes and preferred feeding areas favored by their mothers, effectively passing geographic knowledge down much the way hunting techniques are passed down. This deep familiarity with a home range can make certain dolphin populations vulnerable to changes in their local environment, such as construction, pollution, or shifts in prey caused by changing water conditions, since their accumulated knowledge is tied closely to a very specific and sometimes fragile stretch of coastline. Group hunting in dolphins is not limited to coordinated strategies involving many individuals working in unison. In some cases, dolphins appear to specialize in particular roles within a single hunt, with certain individuals consistently taking on the job of herding prey into a tight group while others wait in position to feed once the group has been corralled. Over repeated hunts, the same individuals often settle into the same roles again and again, suggesting a degree of consistency and possibly even a form of division of labor within a cooperating group. This kind of role specialization requires more than simple instinct, since it depends on individuals recognizing their position relative to podmates and adjusting their own behavior based on what the rest of the group is doing at any given moment. Another example of the flexible, socially coordinated behavior that runs throughout dolphin hunting strategies across many different populations and environments. Beyond the well-known clicks and whistles, dolphins produce a distinctive sound called a jaw clap or jaw pop by snapping their jaws together sharply underwater, a sound that researchers generally interpret as a signal of irritation, warning, or mild aggression rather than a tool used for echolocation or friendly communication. This sound often appears during moments of social tension, such as competition over food, disputes between individuals, or when a dolphin wants to warn another to keep its distance. Similarly, a sharp tail slap against the surface of the water can serve as an alarm signal, alerting nearby pod members to a potential threat or simply expressing frustration, and the sound can travel a considerable distance, both above and below the surface. Together with body postures such as an arched back, bared teeth, or a rigid, tense swimming posture, these acoustic signals form part of a broader system dolphins use to manage social tension without necessarily resorting to physical conflict, allowing disputes within a pod to often be resolved through clear, unmistakable warning signals rather than sustained aggression. Female dolphins in many species reach sexual maturity somewhere between 5 and 13 years of age, depending on the species, while males often mature slightly later, and full adult size in some larger species is not reached until well into the second decade of life. This slow developmental timeline mirrors the pattern seen in other long-lived, socially complex mammals, where a longer period of growth and learning before reproduction tends to accompany greater behavioral flexibility and more complex social structures. Pregnancy in dolphins typically lasts around a year, though the exact length varies by species, and females generally space births several years apart, dedicating a significant portion of their adult lives to raising a single calf at a time rather than producing large numbers of offspring in quick succession. This reproductive strategy, few offspring but heavy investment in each one, is a pattern shared with many other intelligent, long-lived species, where the survival of each individual young depends heavily on an extended period of careful care, teaching and protection rather than sheer numbers. Dolphins living in especially clear, shallow water sometimes engage in a behavior researchers call spy hopping, where the dolphin raises its head vertically above the surface, holding position there for a few seconds to get a better look at something happening above the waterline, whether a boat, a person on shore, or simply the surrounding landscape. This behavior gives a dolphin a brief but useful view of its surroundings from an angle its underwater senses cannot fully provide. Since sound travels differently through air than through water, and vision underwater is limited by murkiness, depth, and light penetration, spy hopping tends to appear more often in curious individuals investigating something unfamiliar, and it has been documented across several different dolphin species as well as in some of their larger relatives, including orcas, suggesting the behavior serves a genuinely useful purpose for gathering information rather than being purely incidental. Some dolphin species show a marked preference for particular times of day when it comes to activity level, resting more heavily during certain hours and increasing hunting or social behavior during others, a pattern shaped largely by the daily rhythms of their prey. Species that primarily feed on fish that migrate toward the surface at night or gather more densely during particular hours often adjust their own schedules to match, becoming considerably more active after dark or during the low-light hours around dawn and dusk when prey is easiest to locate and catch. Coastal populations living near areas with heavy daytime boat traffic sometimes shift a portion of their feeding activity to quieter nighttime hours as well, reducing the disturbance caused by engine noise interfering with echolocation. These patterns are rarely absolute, since dolphins generally remain flexible enough to adjust their schedule when circumstances change, but many populations do show consistent daily rhythms. Once researchers track their behavior closely enough over an extended period, a dolphin's melon, the rounded, fatty structure that gives many species their smoothly domed forehead, plays a central role in shaping and focusing the sound waves used for echolocation. Rather than being a simple mass of fat, the melon is made of specialized lipids arranged in layers of varying density, which bend and focus outgoing clicks into a tight, directional beam, much the way a lens focuses light. Some dolphins can actually adjust the shape of the melon slightly using surrounding muscles, fine-tuning the focus and direction of their echolocation beam depending on what they are trying to examine and how far away it happens to be. This adjustable acoustic lens allows a dolphin to switch between a broad, sweeping beam useful for scanning a wide area and a narrow, highly focused beam useful for examining a specific object in fine detail, giving them a level of active control over their primary sense that has no direct equivalent among land-based mammals relying mainly on vision. Play between dolphins is not limited to interactions with their own species. Documented cases exist of wild dolphins engaging in what looks very much like playful behavior with other marine animals, including seals, whales, and even, on rare occasions, sea turtles, nudging them, swimming alongside them, or engaging in chase-like behavior that does not appear to be predatory in nature. Some of the more striking documented interactions involve young dolphins and juvenile whales of a much larger species traveling and playing together for extended periods, behavior that researchers have found difficult to explain through any obvious survival benefit, reinforcing the idea that dolphins sometimes seek out social or playful interaction simply because they find it engaging, regardless of species boundaries. These interspecies interactions remain relatively rare and are not consistent across all dolphin populations, but their existence adds another layer to the picture of dolphins as animals with behavioral motivations that extend beyond the basic requirements of survival and reproduction. Communication between a mother dolphin and her calf begins even before birth, with some evidence suggesting that calves are exposed to and may begin recognizing their mother's signature whistle while still developing, allowing for faster bonding once they are born. In the earliest days after birth, mothers whistle frequently near their newborn calf, and researchers believe this repeated exposure helps the calf begin forming the auditory association it will later use to recognize and eventually develop its own distinct signature whistle. If a calf becomes separated from its mother, even briefly, both individuals typically increase the rate and volume of their whistling considerably, a pattern interpreted as an active effort to re-establish contact through sound in an environment where visibility can often be limited. This heavy reliance on acoustic communication during the vulnerable early period of a calf's life underscores just how central sound is to nearly every aspect of a dolphin's world. From the moment of birth onward, certain dolphin species show a striking degree of geographic variation in their calls, with populations living in different regions developing distinct dialects in their whistles and pulsed calls, broadly comparable to regional accents found in human language. Researchers studying these variations have found that dolphins from different areas, even within the same species, can produce recognizably different call patterns, and in some cases dolphins seem to respond more readily to calls produced by members of their own regional population than to similar calls recorded from a distant group. The exact mechanisms behind these dialects are still being studied, but they likely arise through a combination of genetic factors and, more significantly, social learning, as calves grow up surrounded by and imitating the specific call patterns used within their local pod. These regional differences add yet another layer of complexity to dolphin communication, suggesting that a dolphin's acoustic world is shaped not only by species-wide patterns, but by the specific community and geographic area it happens to call home. Fishing communities in a handful of locations around the world have developed genuine, long-standing cooperative relationships with wild dolphins, a partnership that has, in certain places, persisted across multiple human generations. In these arrangements, dolphins drive schools of fish toward wading fishers, sometimes signaling with a distinctive tail, slap or dive pattern that tells the fishers exactly when and where to cast their nets. And in return, the dolphins gain easy access to fish that scatter in the resulting confusion, a portion of which the dolphins are able to catch for themselves. Researchers studying these partnerships have found that specific dolphins tend to work with specific human fishing families or crews over long periods, with the skill and signaling behavior sometimes passed down within dolphin family lines, much like other learned techniques. These relationships represent one of the few well-documented examples of sustained, mutually beneficial cooperation between wild dolphins and humans that arose naturally, rather than through training in a managed setting, and they offer a striking real-world illustration of how dolphins are capable of learning to coordinate their behavior with an entirely different species over an extended period of time. The extremely close bond between certain male dolphins, particularly the long-term alliances formed to cooperate in finding mates, appears to be reinforced through frequent physical contact, synchronized swimming, and shared vocal patterns that some researchers describe as strengthening social cohesion much the way grooming does among primates. Allied males often swim in close mirrored formation, surfacing to breathe and diving again almost simultaneously, and they sometimes engage in synchronized acrobatic displays, leaping or spinning together in a coordinated pattern. This synchrony is thought to serve as a visible public signal of the strength and unity of the alliance, both to potential rivals and to females who may use the coordination as one indicator of an alliance's overall cohesion and reliability. Physical contact between allied males, including gentle rubbing or resting a pectoral fin against a partner, appears frequently as well, paralleling similar affiliative touching documented in many other socially bonded mammal species, and suggesting that maintaining these critical alliances requires ongoing social investment rather than simply forming once and remaining stable without further effort. Certain dolphin populations, living in particularly cold or nutrient-rich waters, have been documented displaying unusually thick blubber layers compared to their warm water relatives of the same species, an adaptation that allows them to maintain a stable body temperature even in near-freezing conditions. This variation shows how flexible dolphins can be in adapting to local environmental pressures even within a single species. With populations separated by wide stretches of ocean, sometimes developing noticeably different physical characteristics suited to their particular climate. Beyond blubber thickness, some cold water populations also show subtle differences in body proportions, often slightly more compact overall shape that reduces the ratio of surface area to body volume, a common adaptation across many cold adapted animals that helps minimize heat loss. These regional physical adaptations, layered on top of the behavioral and cultural differences already documented across dolphin populations, paint a picture of a species, or in some cases a group of closely related species, remarkably capable of tailoring both body and behavior to fit an enormous range of ocean environments. Dolphins appear to grieve in ways that closely resemble mourning behavior documented in a small number of other highly social species, including elephants and some primates. Mothers have been repeatedly observed carrying the body of a deceased calf at the surface for days, sometimes refusing to let it sink even as the carcass begins to deteriorate. And other pod members will occasionally gather around, apparently reluctant to leave the area. Similar behavior has been documented around adult dolphins that have died, with podmates supporting the body at the surface, nudging it, or remaining close by for extended periods rather than immediately moving on. Researchers are careful about attributing precise emotional states to animal behavior, since it is difficult to know exactly what a dolphin is experiencing internally, but the consistency, intensity, and duration of these responses across many separate documented cases have led many scientists studying dolphin behavior to describe it using language typically reserved for grief, a response to loss that appears to go well beyond simple confusion or curiosity about a non-responsive body. The exact number of teeth, the shape of the skull, and the overall body proportions can vary considerably even among fairly closely related dolphin species, reflecting subtle differences in diet and hunting style. Species that primarily target small, fast-moving fish in open water tend to have longer, narrower snouts lined with many small teeth, well suited for quick, precise strikes, while species that feed more heavily on squid or bottom-dwelling prey sometimes show slightly different jaw proportions better suited to their particular feeding style. These physical differences, though sometimes subtle to an untrained eye, are one of the primary tools researchers use to distinguish between the many different dolphin species that can otherwise look broadly similar at a glance, especially when only a brief glimpse is caught at the surface. Careful study of skull shape, fin proportions, and coloring patterns remains an essential part of dolphin research, particularly for the many lesser-known species that receive far less public attention and scientific study than more familiar species, like the bottlenose dolphin. While bottlenose dolphins are by far the most commonly recognized and most frequently studied species, in large part because of their prevalence in coastal waters worldwide and their long history in professional care settings, the broader dolphin family includes dozens of distinct species adapted to environments ranging from open ocean to freshwater rivers thousands of miles from any sea. This diversity means that generalizations drawn from the most familiar species do not always hold true across the entire family. Some dolphin species are almost never seen by humans, living in deep offshore waters far from coastlines and rarely approaching boats, while others have adapted specifically to murky, sediment-heavy river systems, developing markedly different sensory adaptations suited to an environment where echolocation, rather than vision, does almost all of the work. Understanding dolphins as a genuinely diverse family rather than a single uniform animal reveals just how successfully this basic body plan has been reshaped, again and again to fit an extraordinary range of aquatic, habitats across the planet. Some dolphin species display striking color patterns that develop gradually over the course of an individual's life rather than remaining fixed from birth, with calves born a relatively plain, uniform color that slowly develops distinctive spots, stripes, or patches as the animal matures. This gradual pattern development means that researchers studying a wild population can often estimate an individual dolphin's approximate age simply by observing how developed its markings have become. Since younger animals consistently show less pronounced patterning than fully mature adults of the same species, the biological purpose behind these age-related color changes is not fully settled, though some researchers suspect that developing patterns may play a role in visual communication within the pod, potentially signaling an individual's approximate age or maturity level to other dolphins at a glance. Useful information in a highly social species where age and experience can carry real weight in group dynamics. A dolphin's pectoral fins, the paired flippers on either side of its body, function primarily for steering and fine control rather than for propulsion, which comes almost entirely from the tail. By angling and rotating these flippers, a dolphin can execute tight turns, sudden stops, and precise adjustments in depth, giving it the maneuverability needed to chase agile prey or navigate through complex, underwater terrain like reefs or rocky outcrops. The dorsal fin, running along the back of most dolphin species, serves a different purpose, acting mainly as a stabilizer that helps prevent the body from rolling uncontrollably while swimming at speed, similar in basic function to the keel of a boat. Not every dolphin species has a dorsal fin of the same shape or size, and a small handful of river-dwelling species have a much reduced or differently shaped dorsal ridge, instead of the prominent curved fin associated with most ocean-going dolphins, an adaptation likely related to the different demands of swimming through shallow, obstacle-filled river water. Underwater noise created by human activity, including shipping traffic, sonar, and industrial construction, can interfere with a dolphin's ability to use echolocation and communicate effectively with other members of its pod. Since much of this noise overlaps with the frequency ranges dolphins rely on most heavily, in particularly busy shipping lanes or harbors, researchers have documented dolphins raising the volume, adjusting the pitch, or repeating their calls more frequently in an apparent effort to be heard over background noise, a pattern similar to how a person might raise their voice in a loud room. Some populations living in consistently noisy areas appear to shift their activity toward quieter hours when possible, reducing the amount of time spent trying to communicate or hunt during peak noise periods. This sensitivity to underwater sound conditions highlights just how central acoustic information is to nearly every part of a dolphin's daily life, from finding food to maintaining contact with a mother or podmate, making the underwater soundscape itself an important, if often invisible, part of the environment dolphins depend on. Certain dolphin species show a marked preference for very specific water depths or seafloor types, staying almost exclusively within a narrow band of habitat that suits their particular hunting style and prey preferences. Species that specialize in deep water squid, for example, tend to spend the majority of their time far from shore over deep ocean basins, only rarely appearing in the shallow coastal waters where other, more familiar dolphin species are commonly observed. Other species show the opposite pattern, remaining almost entirely within shallow, sheltered bays, estuaries, and river mouths, environments where slightly different hunting techniques and social structures have developed to suit the more confined, often murkier conditions. This habitat specialization means that two dolphin species living within the same general region of ocean might rarely, if ever, actually encounter one another, each occupying its own particular slice of the available underwater environment, shaped by millions of years of adaptation to a specific set of conditions. Vocal learning, the ability to modify sounds based on what is heard from others rather than producing only fixed, instinctive calls, appears to be well developed in dolphins, and it plays a central role in how signature whistles form and change over an individual's lifetime, beyond simply developing an original signature whistle during infancy. Some dolphins have been documented altering aspects of their own whistle later in life, sometimes converging in subtle ways with the whistle characteristics of a new close companion or mate, a flexibility that suggests dolphin vocal identity is not entirely fixed once established. Dolphins raised in professional care alongside other marine mammal species have in a handful of documented cases even begun mimicking sounds typical of the other species they were housed with, further demonstrating a level of vocal flexibility that is relatively rare across the animal kingdom, outside of a small number of groups, including certain birds, some primates, and a few other marine mammals, such as certain whale species. The overall body shape of a dolphin, smooth, tapered, and free of any external protrusions beyond the fins, represents a remarkably efficient adaptation for moving through water with minimal drag. Even small details of dolphin anatomy contribute to this efficiency, including nipples and genital openings tucked into small slits along the body rather than protruding outward, and eyes and ears set into smooth depressions rather than raised structures that would otherwise create turbulence while swimming at speed. Skin texture also plays a subtle role, with a very fine, almost imperceptible ridged microstructure on some species that may help reduce drag by influencing how water flows directly along the surface of the body, an effect similar in principle to the specialized fabric designs used in some competitive swimwear. Taken together, these small anatomical details reflect millions of years of evolutionary refinement toward a single overarching goal: moving through water as efficiently as possible, whether cruising steadily across long distances or accelerating suddenly to chase down fast-moving prey. Researchers studying dolphin cognition have used a variety of tasks to probe how dolphins understand and interact with their environment, including tests involving mirrors, symbol recognition, and the ability to follow pointing gestures made by a human trainer, a task that many other intelligent animals, including some primates, actually struggle with. Dolphins have also demonstrated the ability to understand simple syntax in an artificial gestural language developed by researchers, correctly distinguishing between instructions that differed only in the order of the signals given, such as understanding the difference between fetching one object and bringing it to a second object versus the reverse action. Dolphins have further shown an ability to grasp abstract concepts, such as sameness and difference, correctly identifying which of several objects matched a sample object shown to them, even with entirely novel objects they had never encountered during training. These cognitive abilities, spanning language like comprehension, abstract reasoning, and social understanding, form much of the scientific basis behind the broader reputation dolphins hold as among the most intelligent animals in the ocean. Dolphins evolved from land-dwelling, hoofed mammal ancestors roughly 50 million years ago, a transition that ranks among the more dramatic evolutionary shifts documented in the fossil record. Early ancestral forms retained functional hind limbs long after adopting an increasingly aquatic lifestyle, and fossils from this transitional period show a gradual shrinking and eventual near disappearance of the rear legs as the body became better suited to full-time life in the water. Traces of this ancestry remain visible even in modern dolphins, which still carry small, vestigial internal bones near the base of the body corresponding to a reduced pelvis and hind limb structure, remnants of legs that no longer serve any functional purpose. This evolutionary history places dolphins within a broader group of animals called cetaceans, which also includes whales and porpoises, all descended from the same land-based ancestral line that gradually abandoned life on land, entirely in favor of the ocean. Distinguishing a dolphin from a porpoise, its close relative, comes down to a handful of consistent physical and behavioral differences, despite the frequent confusion between the two in everyday conversation. Dolphins generally have a more pronounced, often curved beak like snout, cone-shaped teeth, and a taller, more curved dorsal fin, while porpoises tend to have blunter faces, spade-shaped rather than conical teeth, and a smaller, more triangular dorsal fin. Behaviorally, dolphins are typically more acrobatic and vocal, frequently breaching and engaging in visible social interaction near the surface, while porpoises tend to be quieter, more reserved, and less likely to approach boats or interact visibly with humans. The two groups also differ at a deeper biological level, having diverged from a shared ancestor millions of years ago into what are now considered distinct, though closely related cetacean families, each following its own evolutionary path toward slightly different body shapes and behaviors suited to their particular ecological niches. Some coastal dolphin populations have adapted their hunting behavior specifically around the presence of fishing boats, learning to follow trawlers and take advantage of fish disturbed or discarded during commercial fishing operations. This behavior, sometimes called depredation, when it involves dolphins removing fish directly from nets or fishing lines, represents a learned adaptation to a relatively recent change in the environment. Since large-scale commercial fishing has only existed for a small fraction of dolphin evolutionary history, dolphins that engage in this behavior often show a clear ability to recognize the sound signature of a specific type of fishing vessel or gear from a considerable distance, moving toward the sound in anticipation of an easy meal well before the boat itself becomes visible. While this adaptability demonstrates the flexible, opportunistic intelligence dolphins bring to finding food, it can also create conflict with fishing operations and occasionally puts dolphins at increased risk of entanglement, illustrating how the same cognitive flexibility that makes dolphins so successful can sometimes lead them into genuinely hazardous situations near human activity. A dolphin's field of underwater vision is further supported by the physical structure of its eye, which is well adapted to handle the wide range of light conditions found at different ocean depths. From bright, sunlit shallows to the dim, almost lightless water found several hundred feet below the surface. The pupil in many dolphin species can change shape dramatically, from a small, tightly constricted circle in bright light to a much wider crescent or heart-shaped opening in dim conditions, allowing considerably more light to reach the retina when needed. This flexibility helps dolphins transition smoothly between the very different lighting environments they may encounter within a single day, moving from bright surface waters down toward darker depths and back again during normal diving and hunting behavior, without the kind of prolonged adjustment period that might otherwise leave them at a temporary disadvantage and low visibility group defense against predators. Particularly sharks is one of the clearest practical benefits of living in a dolphin pod rather than alone. When a shark approaches, dolphins will sometimes work together to drive it away, forming a coordinated group that surrounds or repeatedly rams the shark with their snouts, targeting the sensitive gill area in particular. A lone dolphin faces considerably greater risk from a large predator than a dolphin, surrounded by several podmates capable of responding quickly to a threat, and this collective defense capability is thought to be one of the core evolutionary pressures that favored group living in the first place. Beyond active defense, simply having more eyes and ears spread across a group increases the overall chance that a predator will be spotted early, giving the entire pod more time to respond. Whether that response involves active defense, moving to shallower water, or simply increasing vigilance until the potential threat has clearly passed. The specific composition of a dolphin's diet varies considerably depending on species, region, and even individual preference, ranging from small schooling fish and squid to, in a handful of larger species, other marine mammals. Most dolphin species focus primarily on fish and cephalopods, adjusting their specific prey choices based on what is seasonally and locally abundant in their particular stretch of ocean or river. Some individual dolphins within the same population have even been documented showing a stronger preference for certain prey species over others readily available in the same area, a pattern that researchers believe may be shaped partly by early learning from a mother with her own particular hunting specialties. This dietary flexibility allows dolphins to adapt reasonably well to changes in prey availability caused by seasonal shifts, migration patterns of fish populations, or longer-term changes in the surrounding marine ecosystem. An adaptability that has likely contributed to their success across such a wide range of aquatic environments. Group cohesion among dolphins is reinforced not only through vocal communication but through frequent physical contact, including gentle rubbing of one dolphin's body or fin against another, a behavior documented across many different social contexts, from calming an agitated podmate to simply maintaining closeness during periods of rest. Mothers and calves engage in this kind of contact especially frequently, and researchers studying it have noted that certain body areas including the area around the pectoral fins, seem to be particularly common sites for this affiliative touching. Some populations have even been observed engaging in a behavior where one dolphin gently strokes another with its pectoral fin for extended periods, a pattern that closely resembles the social grooming seen in primates, strengthening bonds and potentially helping to reduce social tension within the group. This reliance on touch as a bonding mechanism, alongside sound and shared activity, adds yet another dimension to the layered, multi-sensory way dolphins appear to maintain their complex social relationships over time. While dolphins are broadly associated with warm, tropical, and temperate seas in the popular imagination, several species have adapted successfully to genuinely cold water environments, including regions near the edges of polar ice. These cold water populations rely on the same basic blubber-based insulation strategy found throughout the dolphin family, simply carrying a thicker layer suited to their particular environment, and some show additional behavioral adaptations, such as spending more time in slightly warmer surface waters during especially cold periods, far from being restricted to a narrow band of comfortable tropical water. Dolphins, as a broader family, occupy an enormous span of the planet's aquatic environments, from equatorial coral reef adjacent waters to cold temperate coastlines, a range matched by relatively few other marine mammal groups and made possible by the same underlying combination of insulation, efficient swimming, and behavioral flexibility documented throughout dolphin biology. The bottlenose dolphin is the species most people picture when they think of a dolphin at all, recognizable by its short, sturdy beak, curved dorsal fin, and smooth gray coloring that shifts subtly from darker on top to lighter along the belly. Found in coastal and offshore waters across nearly every temperate and tropical region of the world. Bottlenose dolphins are highly adaptable, equally comfortable hunting in shallow bays, open ocean, and even some brackish river mouths. They form the backbone of most long-term dolphin behavioral research precisely because of how widespread, approachable, and observable coastal populations tend to be, and much of what is known about dolphin social alliances, tool use, and vocal learning comes directly from decades of study on this one species. Bottlenose dolphins typically live in fission-fusion societies, show strong individual personalities, and display an intelligence flexible enough to adapt to environments ranging from wild open coastline to structured professional care settings, making them, in many ways, the most thoroughly documented ambassadors for the entire dolphin family. Orcas, often called killer whales despite being the largest member of the dolphin family rather than a true whale, are immediately recognizable by their bold black and white coloring and the tall, prominent dorsal fin carried by adult males, which can reach well over 5 feet in height, living in tightly bonded matrilineal family groups. Some orca populations remain with their mothers for their entire lives, developing extremely stable, long-term social units that pass down specialized hunting techniques across generations. Different orca populations show remarkably distinct diets and hunting styles depending on region, with some specializing almost entirely in fish, others in seals and other marine mammals, and still others in sharks, each population sticking closely to its particular specialty, even when other prey is available nearby. This dietary and cultural specialization, maintained consistently within specific family lines over long periods, represents one of the clearest documented examples of distinct cultural traditions within a single wide-ranging species anywhere in the animal kingdom. Common dolphins, true to their name, are among the most widely distributed and numerous dolphin species in the world's oceans, typically identified by a distinctive hourglass pattern of yellow, tan, and gray coloring along their sides. They travel in large, highly active groups, sometimes numbering in the hundreds or even low thousands, and are known for spectacular, energetic surface behavior, including frequent leaping, spinning, and synchronized breaching across wide stretches of open ocean. Common dolphins favor deeper offshore waters more than some of their coastal relatives, often following the seasonal movements of the small schooling fish and squid that make up the bulk of their diet. Their large group sizes and energetic surface activity make them one of the more dramatic species to encounter at sea, with sightings sometimes involving what looks like an entire stretch of ocean churned into motion by hundreds of dolphins moving, leaping, and hunting together at once. Spinner dolphins earned their name from a truly distinctive behavior, leaping clear of the water and rotating rapidly along their body's long axis, sometimes completing several full spins before splashing back down, a maneuver unmatched in complexity by most other dolphin species. Researchers have proposed several possible explanations for this behavior, including communication, removing parasites or clinging remeras from the skin, or simply an energetic form of play, and it is likely that different instances of spinning serve different combinations of these purposes depending on context. Found mainly in warm, tropical waters, spinner dolphins are highly social, traveling in large groups and often resting during the day in sheltered, shallow bays before moving out to deeper water at night to feed on small fish and squid that migrate toward the surface after dark. Their striking acrobatic displays, visible even from a considerable distance, have made them one of the more recognizable and frequently sought-out dolphin species for wildlife observation in tropical, coastal regions around the world. Risso's dolphins stand out immediately for their unusual, heavily scarred appearance, with adults often covered in a dense network of pale scratches and scars that accumulate over a lifetime, likely from social interactions with other Risso's dolphins as well as encounters with the squid that make up the bulk of their diet. Younger individuals are born a much darker, more uniform gray, gradually lightening and accumulating scarring as they age, meaning an experienced observer can often estimate roughly how old a Risso's dolphin is simply based on how pale and scarred its skin has become. Unlike many dolphin species with a pronounced beak, Risso's dolphins have a blunt, rounded head with almost no beak at all, a shape closely tied to their diet, since squid hunting relies more on suction-based feeding than the precise, beak-assisted strikes used by fish hunting species. Found in deep offshore waters across much of the world, Risso's dolphins tend to be less commonly seen than coastal species, spending most of their time far from shore in waters deep enough to support the squid populations they depend on. The Amazon River dolphin, also widely known as the Boto or pink river dolphin, lives entirely in fresh water, ranging throughout the Amazon and Orinoco River basins in South America, an environment radically different from the open ocean most people associate with dolphins. Adults often display a distinctive pink coloring that becomes more pronounced with age and activity level, a result of blood vessels near the surface of the skin becoming more visible, particularly in older or more excited individuals. Living in murky, sediment-heavy river water, where visibility is often extremely limited, Boto rely almost entirely on echolocation to navigate and hunt, and their flexible, unfused neck vertebrae allow them to turn their heads at unusually sharp angles, a useful adaptation for maneuvering through flooded forest and root systems during seasonal high water periods. Deeply embedded in South American folklore, the Boto features prominently in local legend, and its unusual appearance in isolated freshwater habitat make it one of the most distinctive and ecologically unique members of the entire dolphin family. The Ganges River dolphin lives in the freshwater river systems of the Ganges and Brahmaputra basins in South Asia, an environment so murky and sediment-laden that the species has evolved to be functionally blind, relying almost entirely on echolocation to navigate and hunt rather than sight. Its eyes lack a functional lens and are reduced to little more than light-sensitive spots, useful only for detecting the general direction and intensity of light rather than forming any kind of real image. A striking example of a sensory system reduced almost to nothing once it stopped providing a meaningful survival advantage in such consistently murky water. Ganges River dolphins swim in a distinctive manner, often tilted onto one side, a posture believed to help them detect subtle variations in the riverbed and locate prey buried in silt along the bottom. Considered culturally and ecologically significant across the region, the species faces considerable pressure from dam construction, water pollution, and fishing activity throughout its limited freshwater range, making careful long-term monitoring an important part of efforts to understand its population and behavior. The Indus River dolphin, a close relative of the Ganges River dolphin, lives exclusively within the Indus River system in present-day Pakistan, occupying a similarly murky freshwater environment and sharing many of the same striking adaptations, including severely reduced eyesight and a heavy reliance on echolocation for virtually every aspect of daily life. Like its Ganges relative, the Indus River dolphin often swims tilted to one side, trailing a pectoral fin near the riverbed in a posture thought to assist with detecting prey hidden along the bottom in low visibility water. Populations have become increasingly fragmented over recent decades due to the construction of irrigation barrages along the river, which divide the historic range into smaller, isolated sections that limit movement and genetic exchange between different groups. Despite these pressures, the species has shown some capacity for adaptation, including learning to navigate around and even through certain barrage structures during periods of high water, a testament to the same behavioral flexibility documented throughout the wider dolphin family. Even in one of its most specialized and geographically restricted members, Irrawaddy, dolphins occupy a range spanning coastal waters and several major river systems across South and Southeast Asia, giving them one of the more unusual habitat profiles among dolphins. Comfortable in both brackish coastal estuaries and, in some populations, fully freshwater stretches of major rivers far from any ocean. Their rounded head, complete lack of a pronounced beak, and small, low dorsal fin give them a somewhat distinctive silhouette compared to more familiar beaked dolphin species, a shape that some observers compare to a small whale rather than a typical dolphin. Irrawaddy dolphins are known for a behavior in which they spit streams of water from their mouths while hunting, a technique believed to help herd or startle small fish into a more concentrated group that is easier to catch. In several regions, particularly certain stretches of river in Southeast Asia, local fishing communities have developed cooperative fishing relationships with Irrawaddy dolphins broadly similar to those documented with other dolphin species elsewhere, working together to drive fish toward weighting nets in a partnership that benefits both the dolphins and the fishers involved. Hector's dolphin, found only in the coastal waters surrounding New Zealand, ranks among the smallest dolphin species in the world, with adults typically reaching only around 4 to 5 feet in length, easily distinguished by a distinctively rounded, black dorsal fin shaped somewhat like a small satellite dish rather than the more common curved or triangular fin found on most other dolphin species. Hector's dolphins are also notable for their limited range, staying almost entirely within a relatively narrow band of shallow coastal water rather than venturing far offshore. A closely related subspecies known as Maui's dolphin lives along a small section of New Zealand's coast and represents one of the rarest and most limited dolphin populations anywhere in the world, with a total population numbering only in the very low hundreds. Both Hector's and Maui's dolphins tend to travel in small groups, generally staying close to their limited coastal home range for their entire lives, a pattern that makes them relatively easy to study in detail, but also particularly vulnerable to changes within that narrow stretch of coastline. Commerson's dolphin is easily recognized by its bold, striking black and white coloring, often described as resembling a small orca, with a sharply defined pattern that stands out clearly even from a considerable distance at the surface. Found primarily in the cold coastal waters near the southern tip of South America, as well as a separate, smaller population near the remote Kerguelen Islands in the southern Indian Ocean, Commerson's dolphins are relatively small, energetic, and often seen riding the bow waves of boats or playing in the turbulent water near river mouths and tidal currents. Their compact, rounded body shape and small, rounded dorsal fin are thought to help minimize heat loss in the cold waters they inhabit, a physical adaptation broadly similar in purpose to the more compact body shapes seen in other cold water adapted dolphin populations elsewhere in the world. Highly active swimmers, Commerson's dolphins are frequently observed engaging in fast, agile movements through choppy, turbulent water, seemingly well suited to and even drawn toward the more chaotic, current-heavy conditions found near the tip of the South American continent, Pacific. White-sided dolphins inhabit the cooler waters of the North Pacific, identifiable by a distinctive pattern of light gray and white markings along their sides that create a bold, layered look paired with a notably tall, curved dorsal fin, often described as having a two-toned coloring of its own. Highly social and energetic, they travel in large groups that can range from a few dozen to several hundred individuals, and they are known for frequent acrobatic surface behavior, including high leaps and enthusiastic bow riding alongside boats. Pacific white-sided dolphins often associate with other marine species while traveling and feeding, including occasional mixed groups alongside other dolphin species or even larger whales, taking advantage of shared feeding opportunities when different species happen to target the same concentrations of fish. Their preference for cooler, productive offshore waters means they are less commonly seen close to shore compared to some other dolphin species, more typically encountered by researchers and observers on boats. Venturing further out into open Pacific waters, Atlantic spotted dolphins begin life with a smooth, largely unmarked gray coloring and gradually develop the dense pattern of light and dark spots that gives the species its name as they age, meaning a heavily spotted individual is almost always a mature adult, while a cleaner, less marked dolphin is likely still young. Found throughout warm, temperate, and tropical waters of the Atlantic, they are known for being notably curious and often approachable, frequently investigating divers, snorkelers, and boats with an apparent interest that has made them a popular species for underwater wildlife observation in certain regions. Atlantic spotted dolphins commonly travel in mixed groups alongside bottlenose dolphins, and interactions between the two species, ranging from cooperative behavior to occasional competitive tension, have been documented and studied extensively in areas where both species share overlapping territory. Their playful, inquisitive nature paired with their gradually developing spotted pattern makes them a particularly visually and behaviorally distinctive species among the many that share the warm, shallow waters of the tropical and subtropical Atlantic. Striped dolphins are named for the bold, dark stripe running from the eye back along the flank toward the tail, a marking that contrasts sharply against their lighter overall coloring and makes them relatively easy to identify even at a distance. Found in temperate and tropical waters worldwide, striped dolphins tend to favor deeper offshore waters over shallow coastal areas, traveling in active, often large groups that can include hundreds of individuals moving and feeding together. Known for energetic surface behavior, including high leaps and somersaults, striped dolphins are considered one of the more acrobatic species among the many that inhabit open ocean environments. They primarily feed on small mid-water fish and squid, often diving to moderate depths in pursuit of prey that gathers in dense layers during the day and rises closer to the surface at night. A pattern striped dolphins appear to track closely as they move through their offshore hunting grounds. Fraser's dolphin remained largely unknown to science for decades after its initial description, known mainly from a single skeleton for many years before living individuals were properly documented in the wild, making it one of the more recently well-characterized members of the dolphin family, despite not being a newly evolved species at all. Compact and stocky compared to many other dolphins, with a notably small dorsal fin and short, barely visible beak. Fraser's dolphins inhabit deep tropical waters and are rarely seen close to shore, typically encountered far out in open ocean where the seafloor drops away to considerable depth. They travel in large, tightly packed groups, often moving quickly and directly across the surface in a manner that has earned them a reputation among researchers for being somewhat more difficult to observe closely compared to species that linger and interact more readily near boats. Their deep water habitat and generally elusive behavior mean Fraser's dolphins remain comparatively less studied than many of their more coastal relatives, with much of what is known about their social structure and behavior still developing. As research techniques for observing deep offshore species continue to improve, rough-toothed dolphins are named for a subtle textural detail on their teeth, fine vertical ridges running along the enamel that are visible under close inspection and distinguish them from the smoother-toothed dolphin species living in similar waters. Their head shape is distinctive as well, with a long, sloped forehead that blends smoothly into the beak without the sharp crease found in many other dolphin species, giving them a somewhat reptilian profile that sets them apart at a glance from more familiar dolphin silhouettes found in warm tropical and subtropical waters worldwide. Rough-toothed dolphins typically travel in smaller groups than many of their more gregarious relatives, and they have been observed engaging in some notably specialized hunting behavior, including cooperative attacks on relatively large prey such as dolphinfish, working together as a small group to subdue prey considerably larger than what a single individual could easily manage. Their less common status compared to more frequently encountered coastal species means rough-toothed dolphins remain a less familiar member of the dolphin family to most people, despite the distinctive physical and behavioral traits that set them apart. White-beaked dolphins inhabit the cold waters of the North Atlantic, easily recognized by a stocky, robust body shape and a short, pale-colored beak that gives the species its name, standing out against the darker gray tones covering most of the rest of the body. Well adapted to cold, often rough offshore water, white-beaked dolphins are strong, capable swimmers frequently seen riding the bow waves of boats, even in choppy conditions that might deter less hardy species. They travel in groups ranging from a handful of individuals to several dozen, feeding on a varied diet that includes fish, squid, and other small marine creatures depending on regional and seasonal availability. Their thick, sturdy build and preference for colder northern waters reflect the same broader pattern of physical adaptation seen throughout the dolphin family, where body shape and insulation are consistently fine-tuned to match the specific thermal demands of whichever stretch of ocean a given population happens to call home. The dusky dolphin, found primarily in cooler coastal waters of the southern hemisphere, including areas near South America, southern Africa, and New Zealand, is known for some of the most consistently energetic and acrobatic surface behavior documented in any dolphin species. Dusky dolphins frequently leap, spin, and somersault well clear of the water, often in rapid succession, and large groups engaging in this kind of coordinated aerial activity can create a dramatic, sustained display visible from a considerable distance. Much of this acrobatic behavior appears connected to their cooperative hunting strategy, in which groups work together to corral small schooling fish into a tight, concentrated ball near the surface, a technique that benefits from the kind of fast, coordinated movement their acrobatic displays seem to showcase. Highly social dusky dolphins often form large groups that shift and merge throughout the day, following the same basic fission fusion pattern documented across much of the wider dolphin family, adjusted to fit the specific cooler coastal waters that make up their preferred habitat. The tucuxi, a small dolphin closely resembling a miniature bottlenose in overall body shape, occupies a genuinely unusual dual habitat, with some populations living entirely in freshwater river systems of the Amazon basin and others living in coastal marine waters along the eastern coast of South America. Despite the two groups being closely related, freshwater and marine tucuxi populations show some subtle physical differences, generally in overall size and proportions, likely reflecting the different demands of river versus coastal ocean environments, though both groups share the same basic rounded head, moderate beak, and curved dorsal fin, typical of the species. Tucuxi are highly social and vocal, often observed in small, active groups engaged in frequent leaping and surface activity, behavior broadly similar to what is seen in many oceanic dolphin species despite the freshwater population living an entire life cycle far from any true ocean. Their presence in both river and coastal marine environments makes the tucuxi a particularly interesting example of how flexible dolphin adaptation can be, with essentially the same basic species successfully occupying two quite different aquatic worlds. The Indo-Pacific humpback dolphin, sometimes called the Chinese white dolphin, and parts of its range, is notable for a distinctive hump located along the back and front of the dorsal fin in adult individuals, along with a coloring that can shift dramatically over an animal's lifetime, with some populations developing an almost entirely pale pink or white coloring as they mature into adulthood, found along coastal waters stretching from parts of Africa through South and Southeast Asia to southern China. This species tends to favor shallow, near-shore habitats, including river mouths and estuaries, placing it in frequent close proximity to areas with heavy human coastal development and boat traffic. The pale, sometimes strikingly pink adult coloring seen in certain populations, similar in underlying cause to the pink tone found in the unrelated Amazon River dolphin, results from blood vessels near the skin surface becoming more visible, a pattern that tends to become more pronounced with age and physical exertion. Living so closely alongside dense human coastal populations across much of its range makes the Indo-Pacific humpback dolphin one of the more visible examples of a dolphin species whose daily life regularly intersects with heavily used, human-dominated coastal waters. Short-finned pilot whales, despite their name, belong to the dolphin family, joining orcas as another example of a large, whale-like species that is technically classified among the dolphins rather than the true whales, distinguished by a rounded, bulbous forehead and predominantly black or dark gray coloring. Short-finned pilot whales live in tightly bonded matrilineal groups, broadly similar in structure to orcapods, with strong, long-lasting family bonds that can persist across an individual's entire life. They are deep-diving specialists, capable of descending to considerable depths in pursuit of squid, their primary prey, sometimes remaining submerged for extended periods during these deep foraging dives. Highly social and vocal, short-finned pilot whales communicate using a range of calls broadly similar in complexity to those documented in other large, Socially complex dolphin species and their close family bonds have occasionally led to the same kind of mass stranding behavior seen in other tightly bonded dolphin species, where a group refuses to abandon a sick or injured member, even when doing so leads the entire group into dangerously shallow water. Long-finned pilot whales, close relatives of the short-finned species, are found primarily in cooler waters, including parts of the North Atlantic and Southern Ocean, distinguished mainly by their notably longer pectoral fins relative to body size, a feature that gives the species its name and sets it apart from its short-finned counterpart. Like their short-finned relatives, long-finned pilot whales live in strongly bonded matrilineal family groups and specialize heavily in deep diving pursuit of squid, often traveling and foraging as a cohesive unit that can number anywhere from a handful to several dozen individuals. Their preference for colder water compared to the short-finned species reflects a broader pattern across many dolphin species pairs, where closely related species split their range along a rough temperature gradient, allowing each to specialize in slightly different thermal conditions, while still occupying broadly similar ecological roles as deep diving, squid hunting, highly social members of the wider dolphin family. Clamine dolphins, found in the warm waters of the tropical and subtropical Atlantic, are notable for being one of the few dolphin species confirmed to result from a natural hybridization event between two other closely related species over the course of their evolutionary history, specifically tracing part of their ancestry to both the spinner dolphin and the striped dolphin. This hybrid origin makes the clamine dolphin something of a rarity among mammals generally, since successful. Staple hybrid species are relatively uncommon outside of certain plant groups and a handful of other animal lineages. Physically, clamine dolphins show a blend of features reminiscent of both ancestral species, including some spinning behavior at the surface similar to, though generally less elaborate than, the dramatic spins performed by true spinner dolphins. Their relatively recent scientific recognition as a distinct species, only formally separated from other similar-looking dolphins in the latter half of the 20th century, reflects how much research into dolphin taxonomy and genetics has continued to refine and reshape understanding of exactly how many distinct dolphin species exist and how they relate to one another. The northern right whale dolphin holds a distinction unique among most dolphin species, lacking a dorsal fin entirely, giving it a notably smooth, streamlined back that sets it apart at a glance from nearly every other member of the dolphin family found in the same North Pacific waters it inhabits. Slender and fast-moving, with a distinctive black body and a pale white patch along the belly, northern right whale dolphins travel in active, often large groups, frequently leaping low across the surface in smooth, continuous arcs as they move. The absence of a dorsal fin, an unusual trait shared by only a small number of other cetacean species worldwide, likely offers some advantage related to reduced drag or heat loss, though the precise evolutionary reasoning behind its loss in this particular lineage remains an area of ongoing scientific interest. Found in cooler offshore waters of the North Pacific, northern right whale dolphins are less frequently encountered close to shore than many other dolphin species, more typically observed by researchers in passing vessels out in open water rather than in the shallow coastal habitats favored by species like the bottlenose dolphin, Heaviside's dolphin, found only along a relatively narrow stretch of coastline in southwestern Africa, is among the smaller and more geographically restricted dolphin species, rarely encountered outside the cold, nutrient-rich coastal waters created by the Benguela Current running along that particular coast. Compact and sturdy, with a rounded dorsal fin and a distinctive black, white, and gray coloring pattern, Heaviside's dolphins tend to stay close to shore, often in water shallow enough to make them relatively easy to observe from land or small boats, compared to many deeper water dolphin species. Their limited range means the entire species depends heavily on the health and productivity of one specific, relatively small stretch of ocean, making them more vulnerable than wider-ranging species to changes in that particular coastal ecosystem. Despite their restricted range, Heaviside's dolphins appear well adapted to their specific environment, taking full advantage of the unusually productive, nutrient-rich waters created by the cold current running along their home coastline. Dolphins hold a genuinely unusual place among Earth's animals, mammals that returned to the ocean tens of millions of years ago and, in doing so, developed one of the most sophisticated sensory systems found anywhere in nature. Echolocation lets them build a detailed picture of their surroundings using sound alone, useful in the darkest, murkiest water where eyesight would offer little help at all. Their brains, large relative to body size and intricately folded, support a level of social complexity that includes individual personalities, decades-long friendships, layered alliances, and forms of learned, locally specific behavior that researchers are comfortable describing as culture. A signature whistle functions much like a name, called out across open water to reach a specific individual among many. Mothers spend years teaching calves not just how to survive, but how to hunt using the particular techniques favored within their own family line, passing down knowledge the same way any long-lived, socially connected animal might across the many species that make up the dolphin family, from the familiar bottlenose patrolling coastal shallows to the nearly blind river dolphins, navigating sediment-thick water by sound alone. The same basic themes repeat again and again in different forms, bodies shaped by millions of years of returning to an aquatic life, sound used as the primary tool for understanding the world, and social bonds strong and complex enough to include grief, alliance, cooperation, and play. Orcas and pilot whales, despite their size and reputation, sit firmly within this same family, sharing the underlying biology and social patterns found throughout smaller, more familiar dolphin species. Spinner dolphins twist through the air in ways still not fully explained. Risso's dolphins carry a lifetime of scars like a visible record of years lived. Boto move through flooded forest routes with a flexibility no ocean dolphin would ever need. What ties this entire family together is not any single trait, but a consistent pattern of adaptation paired with genuine behavioral depth. A dolphin resting near the surface, one half of its brain still quietly alert, embodies both the physical ingenuity and the constant awareness that has defined this family since it first returned to the water. A pod moving together splitting and reforming throughout the day based on food, mood, and circumstance, reflects a social structure flexible enough to balance individual freedom with the real benefits of staying close to others. Whether hunting cooperatively in a tight circle of mud stirred from a shallow riverbed, riding the pressure wave off the bow of a boat purely, it seems, because it feels good, or maintaining a friendship with a fellow pod member not seen in 20 years. Dolphins consistently reveal a mind built for tracking relationships, remembering the past, and adjusting behavior based on far more than instinct alone. There are dozens of dolphin species scattered across the planet's oceans and a handful of its major rivers, each one a slightly different answer to the same underlying question of how to live successfully as an intelligent, air-breathing mammal in a world of water. Some stayed close to the coast their entire lives, learning every channel and sandbar of a single stretch of shoreline across generations. Others gave up the ocean entirely, adapting instead to the murky, changing waters of a river thousands of miles inland. Still others grew larger and bolder, becoming apex predators capable of specializing in prey as varied as fish, seals, and sharks, depending on which family line they happened to be born into. Through all of that variation, certain patterns hold steady across nearly the entire family. Sound as the primary sense, sustained social bonds as the primary organizing structure, and behavioral flexibility as the primary tool for surviving in whatever particular corner of the water each population happens to call home. Understanding dolphins in this kind of detail, the mechanics of a signature whistle, the layered alliances between allied males, the slow accumulation of scars on a Risso's dolphin, the quiet persistence of a mother refusing to let go of a calf she has lost, adds up to something larger than a simple list of facts. It points toward a family of animals whose inner lives, whatever their exact nature, are clearly built on memory, relationship, and learned behavior passed carefully from one generation to the next. The ocean holds an enormous amount that remains unseen and unknown, and much of dolphin behavior still happens far from any human observer. In deep water, at night, or across stretches of coastline too remote for consistent study. What has been documented so far, though, across decades of careful research on dozens of distinct species, suggests a group of animals shaped as much by their relationships with one another as by the water they move through, carrying an old, deep intelligence quietly beneath the surface of nearly every ocean and more than a few rivers on Earth. Dolphin populations vary considerably in how much direct contact they have with humans, and this variation shapes both scientific understanding of the species and the general public's perception of what a dolphin actually is. Coastal populations, particularly bottlenose dolphins living near heavily populated shorelines, have been observed, photographed, and studied for decades, generating a deep, detailed body of knowledge about their individual lives, relationships, and behavior. Offshore and deep water species, by contrast, are encountered far less frequently, sometimes known mainly through strandings, incidental sightings from research vessels, or brief encounters during dedicated survey expeditions. This uneven distribution of scientific attention means that while species like the bottlenose dolphin are thoroughly documented down to the level of individual social relationships tracked across decades, Other equally complex species remain comparatively mysterious, their social structures and behavioral patterns pieced together from far more limited observation. As research techniques continue to improve, including passive acoustic monitoring that can track vocal activity without needing direct visual contact, understanding of these less visible species continues to slowly expand, filling in gaps left by a history of study that has naturally gravitated toward the dolphins easiest to observe up close. The overall size range within the dolphin family is considerably wider than most people realize, stretching from Hector's dolphin, reaching only around 4 to 5 feet as a full-grown adult, all the way up to the orca, where adult males can exceed 30 feet in length and weigh several tons. This enormous size range exists within a single taxonomic family, meaning the same broad category that includes one of the smallest marine mammals in the world also includes one of the largest and most powerful predators in the ocean. Despite this dramatic difference in scale, the underlying body plan remains remarkably consistent across the entire size range. A streamlined, torpedo-shaped body, a horizontally moving tail fluke, paired pectoral flippers for steering, and in most species, a dorsal fin for stability, all scaled up or down to fit the particular ecological niche each species occupies. This consistency suggests that the basic dolphin body plan, refined over tens of millions of years of evolution, represents an unusually successful and flexible template, one capable of supporting everything from a small, agile river specialist to a massive, powerful apex predator without needing fundamental structural changes along the way. Field researchers studying wild dolphin populations often spend years, sometimes decades, on a single research site, slowly building the kind of detailed individual-level knowledge that makes so much of modern dolphin science possible. This long-term approach matters particularly because dolphin social structures and relationships unfold over timescales that would be completely invisible to a short-term study. Alliances that take years to fully form, mother-calf bonds that stretch across half a decade or more, and friendships that can persist for 20 years or longer between individuals separated for extended stretches of time. Photo identification catalogs built from tail fluke or dorsal fin markings allow researchers to track specific individuals across an entire research career, creating detailed life histories for particular dolphins that can span from birth through multiple generations of their own offspring. This patient, long-term style of research, more akin to following an extended human family across decades than a typical short-term wildlife survey, has been essential in revealing just how much of dolphin life depends on relationships, memory, and learned behavior that would be entirely missed by any study limited to a single season or year. Modern acoustic recording technology has opened up new ways of studying dolphin behavior that do not require direct visual contact at all, using underwater microphones called hydrophones to capture the clicks, whistles, and other calls dolphins produce even when they cannot be seen. These recordings allow researchers to monitor dolphin activity in deep water, at night or in conditions too rough or remote for reliable visual observation, filling in critical gaps left by more traditional boat-based survey methods. By analyzing the specific patterns, frequencies, and timing of recorded calls, scientists can sometimes identify which species are present in a given area, estimate roughly how many individuals might be nearby, and detect behavioral patterns such as increased vocal activity during feeding or social gathering. This acoustic approach has proven especially valuable for studying elusive, deep-water species that rarely approach boats or surface in ways that allow easy visual identification, offering a window into the lives of dolphins that spend the vast majority of their existence far from any human observer, communicating and hunting in a part of the ocean that remains largely invisible to direct study, long after a research project ends or a particular study concludes. The accumulated knowledge about dolphin behavior continues to shape how people think about these animals, informing everything from conservation policy to the simple, everyday sense that dolphins are somehow different from most other wildlife encountered in the ocean. That sense is not merely sentimental. It rests on a genuinely substantial body of evidence, brains built for complex processing, social structures held together by memory and relationship rather than simple proximity, communication systems flexible enough to include individual names, and behavior patterns, from tool use to cooperative fishing with humans, that reflect learning and culture passed down through specific family lines rather than fixed universal instinct. Whether encountered as a familiar bottlenose gliding along a shallow coastline, a scarred Risso's dolphin surfacing far from shore, or a pink-tinted boto weaving through flooded forest roots deep in the Amazon, every member of this wide, varied family carries forward the same underlying story. A mammal that returned to the water tens of millions of years ago and, in doing so, built one of the richest, most socially complex lives found anywhere beneath the surface of the sea.